everybody. Hank Linderman here. I'm back from my break. Our break. It's great to see you all. We've already got Mark Andes. We've already got Mary. Thank you all for being here. Now, you all know, of course, to share, because that's how an angel gets their wings. And, thank you for letting me have a few days off. I needed a few days off. This whole process, I said to somebody recently, I'm your Democratic nominee for Congress, by the way, in Kentucky's 2nd District. And a friend of mine said to me, or I said to them, this is really tough being a candidate under these circumstances. And this person looked at me and said, Hank, it's tough being a voter in these circumstances. So look who's here. Bill McNichol is here. And John Alma Barnett, I'm so glad you're here. Mark Maselli is done. You're sharing. This is awesome. I had a pretty restful Labor Day. I have to confess that I spent a lot of time on the sofa doing this. I just needed to do nothing for a bit. But I think that's what we all needed. And of course, Labor Day is in honor of people who work for a living, and especially people that belong to unions. I'm reaching in my pocket because I want to show you something that was given to me by the, I believe this was handed to me by Mark Dowell from the UAW in Louisville. And this was handed to me. It's a piece of metal, and it was presented like this. We'd like you to have this. So I almost always have this in my pocket. Can you see it? There you go. That's almost always in my pocket. And it reminds me of how America used to be when unions were stronger. Now, of course, there were problems with unions. We're not going to get into that at the moment. But the reality is the middle class never had it so good as to when unions were strong. In fact, people who work were able to be part of the middle class. And unions have suffered since 1980, basically. And so is the middle class. So have poor people. So I certainly support the goal of unions, and I'm honored to have the support of the UAW, the IBEW, and the Teamsters. Anyway, there's a list of several of them, and I apologize I can't bring them to mind right now. But I'm honored by your support. Let's talk about these numbers again related to our response to the COVID epidemic, which so far is, again, unacceptable. We really don't have it together yet. Notice we have crossed well over 190,000 deaths, 193,534. And even though we only had 286 only, if you're one of the families that had a death over the weekend, it's of course a tragedy for you. But it's a lower number. What we have learned, though, is that this lower number is because testing facilities aren't open over the weekend, so the results are not quite clear. As far as new cases, 25,000 new cases, again, yesterday, Labor Day. Let's have a look at the states. The top states remain in trouble, but again, the numbers are a little bit low. We expect that come Wednesday, and we had a long holiday weekend. It'll be usually around Tuesday or Wednesday they pick up, but we're going to see a crunch of numbers. I didn't include Kentucky today because their reporting didn't make it to Worldometers, so I don't have anything to show you about Kentucky, but there was a news story in the Courier-Journal saying that last week was the top week in terms of new infections and new deaths in Kentucky. So we are a long way from dealing with this virus. Something I wanted to remind you all, a few days ago on Friday, we talked about good Republicans, and I'm going to look for one of the, we used as an example, General Dwight Eisenhower. Let's play a few clips from General Eisenhower.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
And I think it is fascinating that after we talked about President Eisenhower, a Republican, discussing the military-industrial complex. In fact, he presented the term first. This was in his farewell speech to the nation. That we wake up this week to find President Trump blaming the top brass for not liking him because they are part of the military-industrial complex. So I don't necessarily disagree with the idea of the existence of the military-industrial complex. I don't think that's why they're not coming forward to support President Trump. Terry Thomas is here, and she's had a friend who passed away from COVID complications in Kentucky today. And, you know, we saw here at the lake, those of us that live here, you know, week in, week out, those of us who live here, we have weekenders that come down, and we're happy to have them. But on big weekends like this weekend, there's a lot of people that showed up. And in the cove next to us, there was a huge houseboat that was a rental, and it was filled with people. And then another boat showed up, a pontoon boat with about 12 people on it, and they got on. So the boats were full. There was virtually no social distancing going on. So in the next several weeks, I suppose there's an anticipation that we'll see some more cases. So anyway, back to our numbers. I'm going to move over here because, oh, not quite. Here we go. President Trump, as we know, suggested last week that people should double vote to test the system. This is, of course, against the law. And in Georgia, they found in the Georgia primary, which was recently, that 1,000 people double voted. A double voter knows exactly what they're doing, diluting the votes of each and every voter that follows the law. Raffensperger, who is the Attorney General, I believe, who would be the person responsible for voting, the Attorney General or perhaps the Secretary of State. Those that make the choice to game the system are breaking the law, and as Secretary of State, I will not tolerate it. All in all, about 150,000 people who requested absentee ballots showed up at polling places on Election Day, often because they never received their absentee ballots in the mail or they decided instead to vote in person. Of those, 1,000 people had returned their absentee ballots to county election offices, and poll workers also allowed them to vote in person. Now, double voting did not change the outcome of any race in the primary, and I'm expecting, they didn't say this so clearly, but it seems to me that if once they recognized that these folks had double voted, they didn't count their votes. So this gentleman, the Secretary of State, is willing to go after voters who vote twice. I think it's one thing if you intentionally go in to subvert the law. It's another thing if you're concerned that your vote won't count. So I think there's going to have to be a little bit of, I don't think it's appropriate to test the vote, what the president asked voters to do in North Carolina. But I know of people who are not sure that their vote was counted. So it does make sense that some people would get confused by that. I don't think they need to go to prison necessarily. But anyway. Let's move on. What do you say? So since we're talking about voting, let's talk about how to vote in Kentucky. Actually, I'm going to go back to number 5. This is from the website called, I don't know the actual thing, but here's what you can type, and this will get you in there. You just type govoteky.com. If you're a Kentuckian and you want to vote, you need to register before October 5th. So that's less than a month. So you should do it today. It only takes minutes. When you go to govoteky.com, you wind up at this website. And look, first thing you probably are going to do is check your registration. And here's let's see what that looks like. Number 6, that's what this looks like. And you fill in your name, and then based on that, they tell you whether you're already registered or not. Then you would go to the next screen, perhaps, or if you've got some other questions, if you can't, because you're going to need a photo ID, apparently. There are some laws. But during COVID, you may be able to fill out a form that says, I wasn't able to get my photo ID because of COVID. I wasn't able to go renew my driver's license or get my ID. There's a process that even if you don't have a photo ID that's required, you can fill out a form that allows you still to vote. So obviously this is critically important. Here's another page from the govotekentucky.com page, and it shows you how to request a ballot, how to fill out the ballot, how to return the ballot, how to vote in person. It is critically important that we vote this year. 100 million people did not vote in 2016.
Now wait just a damn minute.
Exactly. 100 million people didn't vote. And that is a problem. I think the largest group, when you talk about people who voted Republican, people who voted Democrat, people who didn't vote, the people who didn't vote is by far the largest group. So encourage everyone you know, please, to get out and vote. It's very important. It's important that they do it early. Remember, you got to register by October 5th. And I think in a couple of weeks, you're going to start to be able to get your ballot if you've asked for the ballots to be mailed in. Now, the next story I want to talk to you about, let's have a look at this. So this is a story that I found online from the Pew Research Center, and it says that a majority of young adults in the U.S. now live with their parents for the first time since the Great Depression, which is quite some time. I mean, that's quite a big deal. It's now a majority of people of the age between 18 to 29 live with their parents. And look at this. Just from 2019, it was 47%. This year, it is 52%. Previously, the biggest time that the biggest amount of people, young people living at home with their parents, occurred during the Great Depression. So this is historic that this is going on right now, and it's of course of great concern to us. There's another issue about it, and that is that in the past, white children were less likely to be living at home with their parents than children of color, right? Well, now that has almost equalized, it looks like, that this is affecting even parents that, even families that are white that are more privileged than people of color, families of color. So this is striking across, so perhaps it'll get some attention. Anyway, this is now cutting across all social boundaries. We are seeing more and more young people having to live at home. And, I don't know about you, but when I was younger, I couldn't wait to leave home. But necessity requires that young people are having to stay at home. Wages are down, that wages have been flat since the 80s. We see inequality increasing. We see the cost of education increasing. I'm hearing all the time about students who decided not to go back to school because they were going to be quarantined in their dorms and the classes were going to be online anyway. So this is a very, very serious problem, and it's an indication of how deeply we have been affected by the virus and how important it would be for us to go Godzilla on this thing. We definitely need to go Godzilla on this virus. Now, will that happen? Not under this president's leadership. By Go Godzilla, those of you that don't know about this, the idea is we are 6 weeks away from shutting this virus down, largely. It would mean shutting the country down seriously, again, like we did earlier this year, for 6 weeks, and we might have to hang on for another couple of weeks. But at the end of that, we would be in rather good shape, I believe. Anyway, let's move on to our next story. And I'm going to apologize. First of all, this is a medical story that we're going to talk about. And I did not reach out to Greg Adams because, for one thing, I was taking the weekend off and I just stopped thinking about things. So I didn't reach out to Greg. And fair enough. So Greg, if you're listening and you end up calling in, I believe we would hear you. But don't feel any pressure. It's not necessary. And I don't think it's, Greg, hold off. We'll have you in, the next time you're available, which I believe will be next Tuesday. because we're going to talk about physician, healthcare worker fatigue, burnout, which is going on for doctors. So let's talk about this article, which I found, again, from Scientific American, that COVID-19 can wreck your heart even if you haven't had any symptoms. That's quite a headline. So I'm going to read a little bit of the text from this story. From an offensive lineman at Indiana University dealing with possible heart issues to a University of Houston player opting out of the season because of, quote, complications with my heart, end quote. The news has been coming fast and furiously. More than a dozen athletes at Power 5 conference schools have been identified as having myocardial injury following coronavirus infection, according to ESPN. Two of the conferences, the Big Ten and the Pac-12, have already announced they are postponing all competitive sports until 2021. Wow. The Big Ten and the Pac-12, no competitive sports until 2021. And in Major League Baseball, Boston Red Sox ace pitcher Eduardo Rodriguez told reporters that he felt, quote, 100 years old as a result of his bout with COVID. And of Major League Baseball's shortened season because of myocarditis. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly. An inflammation of the heart muscle often triggered by a virus, said Rodriguez, quote, the heart, that's the most important part of your body. So when you hear that you got problems with it, I was scared a little. Now that I know what it is, it's still scary. So obviously a very frightening thing. And Cindy Braun Franklin says that the virus has a huge impact on the entire vascular system. So if that isn't scary enough, let's see if I can show you this. This is a letter from today that I found on Naked Capitalism, one of my favorite sites. And look at this, the bottom letter. My 35-year-old ex-Marine nephew had a miserable case of COVID in April. He was never hospitalized, but he was very sick for about 3 weeks. In late May, he was carrying a basket of laundry in his one-story apartment and fell dead. This is also showing up in children. So this is a very, very serious issue, and perhaps it's something we would like to talk to Dr. Greg about. I certainly would, because I'd appreciate his expertise. Let's have a look at this. This is someone else who died recently of a heart attack last week. It was a shock. He was a non-smoker, non-drinker, seemed active and healthy, had no previous health issues. I don't know if he had COVID, but it certainly raises questions. Here in Ireland, the main hospitals have been warning us that they're becoming overwhelmed by what they say is a hidden second wave, not of COVID, but of people who were treated for COVID in spring and are now returning with a series of seemingly related health issues. So that is where we are. This remains a very, very serious problem. And because the federal government is not willing to actually go at it, in fact, we hear from Larry Kudlow that the virus is over. Here's Larry Kudlow, by the way, who's an economic advisor to the White House, talking about the virus as if it's in the past. Now, he said this 10 days ago, not very long ago. Here you go.
It was awful. Health and economic impacts were tragic. Hardship and heartbreak were everywhere.
I don't know what to say about this, because I've also had a neighbor came over and spoke with me, and he said, well, I have a feeling, and he's a friend, I have a feeling that come November, the virus is just going to disappear. No, the virus is not going to just disappear in November once the election is settled. That's not going to happen, and I hope you all recognize that. I certainly do. I want to tell you all a little bit of other news that is related to the state of Kentucky. The Democratic Party, the KDP, Kentucky Democratic Party, has several groups that advise them. And these are groups like a labor council and so on, and they have various caucuses. There are various caucuses that they have had. Now, this coming year, or this year, they have begun 2 brand new caucuses, and one of them is the Black Caucus, and the other one is called the Rural Council. There's a distinction between council and caucus. Basically, you can choose to be rural, and you can become rural, or you could stop being rural, depending on where you live, or it's a choice thing. Anyway, so this, for the first time in the history of the party, they're going to have a Black caucus and a rural council that will be advisory groups advising the party on various issues. And I think this is historic and important. And I'm happy to announce that I've been asked to chair the Rural Council. And I believe this is a significant step forward for the party in the state of Kentucky. And I'm looking forward to being part of it. And I'm very happy that that's going on. We have a lot of work to do. Democrats in the state of Kentucky, in my opinion, need to organize a lot more. And I've been spending a lot of my efforts organizing Democrats in the 2nd District. Maybe we can take a quick look at the 2nd District. There it is. I'm close to the number 2 in Grayson County, just almost in the middle of Grayson County there, up by the line, the Breckinridge County line. You notice we have 6 legislative districts, and I'm very proud to say that we have representation from all 6 districts in the Rural Council. So look, folks, the election is really on for real now. So it is time for you to go out and help other people to vote. Make sure they, do what you can to get other people registered. Have a look at this. Remember, you have until October 5th to register, but don't delay. What happens if you wait till October 5th and the website's down, or your website, your ability to get online is compromised? So please do it today and let us know that you've done it. And reach out to friends and ask them to do the same. I'm going to show you one more look at the outside. Let's see if it's still functioning. There we go. So that's the outside view here at lovely Falls of Rough. You may even hear some boats go by. I'm so glad that you're here. This is a very important time in all our lives. We call this getting angry, but what that means really, what we really want you to do, it's not enough to get angry and lose your mind. In fact, it's not helpful at all. When you get angry, you want to use that to focus yourself, to do what needs to be done, to become determined to do the right thing for yourself, your family, the state of Kentucky, the nation, and the world. So it is time to dedicate yourselves to making a difference. Don't want to wake up November 4th saying, I wish I could have, would have, should have. So anyway, thank you all for being here. I will see you tomorrow. We have a special guest coming up on Thursday. I don't have a picture of her right now, but we have a young lady who is a powerhouse in the group called Indivisible. In fact, maybe I can show you Indivisible. Indivisible endorsed me, and I'm very proud to have that endorsement. And we're going to have Afton Ben is going to be here and talk to us about the mission of Indivisible. And she's an inspiring individual, and I'm very happy that Afton will be here on Thursday. Some of you already know her. I see Jim Porter is here, and Jim certainly knows Afton. And David is asking again about addicts. David, you'll be happy to know I have begun the process of reaching out to someone who runs a rehab center. We do want to have a discussion about addicts. It seems that we know the answers. We know what we need to do, but there's a reluctance, or we are so caught up with politicians that are willing to help, providing their friends can make a profit. And I think that dealing with addiction is going to be a lot more complex than that, and going to have to be a little bit more open to suggestion than requiring that we make a profit just to help addicts. For example, I think we need to decriminalize addiction. That if you are pulled over and even if you're on parole and you've been pulled over for a broken taillight, they test you for drugs and find out you've been high. If you're on parole, depending on what you're on parole for, they'll send you back to prison. I think you should be sent to rehab. And there are so many ways that we can make this more effective. We can be more effective in dealing with addiction. We can legalize cannabis. We can decriminalize addiction. That does not mean if you're high and you break into someone's house, you should be let go. But it does mean that if all you're guilty of is being an addict, then you should be able to go into rehab. And we need to be able to support families that are dealing with this. There's a number of things that we can do. I believe we know what to do, and for some reason, the politicians we have in office right now are not willing to do it. This is a serious problem in the state of Kentucky. In the state of Kentucky, we have something like 270 people per million die each year due to overdose. West Virginia had it worse. They were up as high as 340, 345 per million. The city of Amsterdam, because they give a safe dose to opioid addicts, they have cut the death rate to 11 people per million. That's a lot better than 345 per million. So there are a lot of ways that we can deal with addiction if we are simply willing to do it. And David, I promise I will reach out and get some more folks willing to come on and discuss this. I just haven't finished doing it. So I promise I'll get that done. Thank you all for being here, and I will see you tomorrow. Like I say, it's time for us all to do the right thing. It's okay to get angry. Better to get determined. Thank you.